Praise be Jesus and Mary. Today we want to firstly welcome Father JoseMaria to his new community, and will be the new local superior, or the father guardian or guardian. So it's a beautiful occasion to welcome him this day and to start this time of service for the friars here, who will certainly benefit greatly from his leadership. And I ask you to welcome him as well, and pray for him as he carries out his duties in serving the brothers here and also yourselves. Today in the Franciscan Order, we celebrate a very special feast day, Our Lady of the Portiuncula, or Our Lady of the Angels. And we are able to obtain a special indulgence today, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, a little bit about the Portiuncula Chapel and its importance in the life of St. Francis. The chapel itself is very small. You probably have seen it, maybe you've visited it in Assisi. It is, according to tradition, this chapel was built in the 4th century by hermits who came from the Holy Land, from the Valley of Josaphat in particular. And then in the year 516, the chapel passed over to the possession of the Benedictines. It was known as the Chapel of Our Lady of the Valley of Josaphat, or Our Lady of the Angels. Our Lady of the Angels, this title was given to it because of Our Lady's Assumption into heaven, honoring that particular mystery. And I believe that's depicted in the interior of the chapel. And you see the angels kind of lifting Our Lady into heaven during the Assumption. But also because it is said that the singing of angels had been heard rather frequently at this chapel. In the early 1200s, St. Francis came across this chapel. It was the third of the chapels he would rebuild. It was originally surrounded by dense woods, which covered the plain of Assisi. St. Francis had a great love for this chapel. The Portiuncula, it was oftentimes called, a nickname meaning the little portion. But he loved the formal name especially, Santa Maria degli Angeli, Holy Mary of the Angels, Our Lady of the Angels. The chapel itself was so simple and poor, and that was particularly attractive, you could say, to St. Francis, who loved holy poverty, Our Lady poverty. This location of the chapel was rather isolated, so it was very quiet and peaceful, appropriate for prayer. And it was also somewhat near the leper hospitals, and the lepers would receive the loving care and attention of St. Francis and his brothers. On February 24th, 1208, on the feast of St. Matthias, St. Francis, on hearing Mass in this Portiuncula chapel, understood more clearly his vocation. So it's very significant for St. Francis and for Franciscans. This is where the Franciscan vocation, you could say, was born, and the Franciscan order as a whole, received its beginnings. And that vocation that St. Francis understood was to follow the gospel in a very radical way, and from the gospel of the day in particular, from Matthew's gospel, to preach the gospel, take nothing for the journey, and to take up the cross daily and follow our Lord. So St. Francis made this little chapel the headquarters of the whole Franciscan order. On October 3rd, 1226, St. Francis reached the end of his earthly sojourn. He asked his friars to lay him down on the bare ground, near the portiuncular chapel where he would die, clad with just loincloth and a hair shirt, I believe it was. So very poorly, he would die practically naked, and blessed his friars and had him laid there on that ground near the portiuncular chapel, and recommended to the friars to always have a special care and protection of the chapel, to be custodians of it always, never leave the chapel. And to this day, they are still there. So the portiuncular indulgence is what we want to obtain today. It happened this way. One night in 1216, St. Francis awoke at night and felt a strong impulse to go to the portiuncular chapel to pray. He did so, and while at prayer, our Lord and Our Lady appeared to him. St. Francis asked our Lord, for the great grace, our Lord having asked him first, what he desired. And St. Francis responded, "O God, although I am a great sinner, I beseech you to grant a full pardon of all sins to all who, having repented and confessed their sins, shall visit this church." So St. Francis made this request on behalf of poor sinners, that they might obtain very special graces in this church that he so greatly loved. Our Lady there in the vision made St. Francis's request her own, and so our Lord responded positively and saying, "Francis, you ask much, but you are worthy of greater things, and greater things you shall have." So our Lord granted this indulgence. Pope Honorius III ratified the approval. And originally the indulgence was attached only to the portiuncular chapel, so you had to go physically to that chapel in Assisi to obtain it. But subsequent popes expanded the privilege to all Franciscan churches, and then eventually to any Catholic church. So it has been made very easily accessible, this indulgence today. I believe if you go to the portiuncular chapel today, or any day of the year, you can obtain the indulgence there. But here on this feast day today, you can obtain it, in any Catholic church, but preferably Franciscan church. So which is what this church is here. And so to obtain the indulgence, it doesn't differ a whole lot from other, you could say, plenary indulgences, the usual conditions. The indulgence act as the visit of the church itself. So visiting this church, for example, being detached from all sin. While in the church, pray one Our Father in the Creed and prayers for the Holy Father's intentions. We'll do that after Mass, so we don't forget before we leave. Make sure we get the indulgence today. And then, of course, to receive the sacrament of reconciliation and the Eucharist within 8 days, and receiving communion preferably on the day itself today. So this indulgence is, it's so simple, and we could say obtaining a plenary indulgence is very simple for us, except for that real difficult condition of being detached from all sin. So we want to be detached from all sin so as to obtain this indulgence. Otherwise, it will be partial. And it just goes to show how much our Lord lavishes His grace and mercy upon us, and how easily it is for us to obtain His grace and mercy. And Our Lady desires this for us, to not have to spend time in purgatory, but upon our death to immediately enter heaven. So it's really a question of whether you and I really desire this that much. That's the main condition, you could say, besides these other conditions. Do you desire to be, to break with sin completely, have nothing to do with it, and only desire to please our Lord, do His will, to get to heaven and to be with Him forever? So that's the main condition, you could say. And we ask Our Lady to help us to have these right interior dispositions, that will help us obtain the indulgence and ultimately holiness of life and heaven itself. Praise be Jesus and Mary.